Good afternoon, everybody. We apologize for the late start here. We're just waiting for our members to file in, and I'm glad we're giving it some time because we want everyone to be able to be here to hear all of these interesting presentations and testimony today. But I am State Senator Jen McEwen. I'm the chair of the Senate Labor Committee, and the Senate Labor Committee is called to order. Welcome, everyone. We're very excited today to have a day of informational presentation and testimony about the issue of artificial intelligence and how it is already and is set to, projected to affect the workforce and working people here in Minnesota. And we have a number of testifiers lined up today due to just a miscommunication. We also have under our testimony, Mr. Wade Lundberg from United Here Local 17 is also set to offer some testimony and is here. He's not listed, but he is part of the testifiers as well. So first, set to present to the committee and to everyone here today is Aaron Rosenthal. And also I'll invite his colleague Jake Schweitzer up as well. They're from the North Star Policy Action and are going to talk to us a little bit about this issue and have a presentation to give us. Normally, colleagues, the way that we will conduct our committee work is we will have the presentation of a bill or an issue, and often we'll wait until all of the testimony has been offered before we ask questions. But I'm going to invite everyone today to go ahead and ask questions as we go through the testimony, because I think that the presentation and testifier may have some very different information, and just so that we're having sort of that conversation as it goes along, I think that might be helpful. So we'll hear from Mr. Rosenthal, and then if there are any questions that members have, and we can have a discussion after that before we hear from our testifiers, we'll do that. Welcome very much to the Senate Labor Committee, and we're very excited to hear from you today. Thank you for being here, and you can proceed when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair McEwen, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today about an issue of vital importance to the state of Minnesota. My name is Aaron Rosenthal. I'm the Research Director for North Star Policy Action. We are an independent research and communications institute dedicated to improving the lives of working Minnesotans by advancing data-driven solutions. I want to begin today by offering some context for our discussion. A 2024 study found that 96% of business executives believe artificial intelligence will boost productivity for their companies. But 77% of the workers using AI found that it actually added to their workload without providing any measurable productivity gain. This disconnect is concerning and underscores the need to evaluate how AI is being integrated into workplaces. Indeed, we're seeing increasingly troubling uses of AI in the workplace. For example, companies implementing computer vision systems that use webcams to monitor workers at their computers, automatically detecting and reporting any perceived violations of company policy, AI algorithms being used to inform and shape healthcare decisions that research has shown can contain racial biases, these biases resulting in poor care for Black patients with unclear liability for the healthcare professionals making those AI-informed decisions. This is all taking place at the same time that AI is being adopted in workplaces at an unprecedented rate. According to a recent report, AI use has tripled in companies over the past 6 years. The use of generative AI, like ChatGPT, doubled between 2023 and 2024 alone. To put this into some perspective, it took about 20 years for personal computers to go from introduction to universal use. By contrast, ChatGPT reached 1 billion visits in its first 4 months in existence. Put simply, AI adoption is happening at a pace we've not seen before, and there is a stark gap between how businesses and workers perceive its benefits. We believe it is essential to take proactive steps to address this gap now. Notably, we are not calling for a slowdown in AI innovation, but rather ensuring that AI is developed in a way that benefits workers rather than harming them. To inform this development, we conducted an analysis aimed at estimating the impact of AI on working Minnesotans, and what we found is significant. 17% of Minnesota workers, approximately 500,000 people, are at high risk of being impacted by AI, with 5%, or 160,000 workers, at very high risk. I want to emphasize that we use this term impact as a deliberately broad term. AI's impact could range from complementing existing jobs to outright replacing them. We believe the difference between these two outcomes will largely depend on the policies the state enacts, which I will discuss shortly. Minnesota's workforce is particularly vulnerable to AI-driven changes when compared to other states. In fact, Minnesota ranks 10th in the nation, we find, and second in the Midwest in terms of the proportion of its workforce set to be impacted by AI. The suggestion from this finding is that Minnesota has a higher concentration of workers in jobs that are susceptible to AI's impact. Here we can see what this looks like in this table by examining the largest Minnesota occupations that are at risk from AI. Notably, the list ranges from software developers to carpenters to lawyers to healthcare service managers. The range of these jobs reveals an essential truth. AI's varied capacity means that its influence is likely to extend to all industries in the state. Our analysis further examined differences across the state in terms of AI's impact. We found, for example, that workers in greater Minnesota appear to be at slightly more risk, particularly for jobs that are categorized as very high risk, with nearly a tenth of greater Minnesota workers falling into this very high risk category. Differing from past technological advancements that have tended to disproportionately impact workers with lower levels of education, we find that AI is in fact expected to have a greater effect on jobs held by individuals with higher educational attainment, likely reflecting AI's capacity to perform really complicated tasks, as well as tasks primarily done within white-collar jobs. Beyond geography and education, we looked at AI's impact across a range of other dimensions, including race and gender, and I'm happy to talk about that if people have questions. Regardless of this varied impact, the biggest takeaway is clear. AI is estimated to play a significant role in changing work in the state of Minnesota across a range of industries and geographies. The critical question is how. And here we see two possible futures. The first is a future in which AI makes workers' lives more fulfilling. In this scenario, AI is used to complement human labor, automating mundane tasks while allowing workers to focus on more meaningful and creative aspects of their jobs. Everyone benefits in this scenario. Workers experience greater job satisfaction, businesses benefit from increased productivity, and the economy as a whole prospers. The second scenario is far less optimistic. In this world, AI is leveraged primarily to drive down wages and displace workers in the service of boosting productivity to line the pockets of billionaire CEOs. In this scenario, the economic gains from AI are concentrated in the hands of the few, increasing inequality and diminishing the livelihoods of working people. Already, we are seeing predictions that AI could create the world's first trillionaire. We firmly believe that the difference between these scenarios will come down to policy decisions made in the near future. Our report outlines several policy solutions to promote the first scenario, building on legislative efforts that we have already seen taking place in other states. The most fundamental approach we promote here is strengthening worker power. If workers have a voice in how AI is implemented, they can help shape the way it is used and improve workplaces rather than eroding job quality. We have already seen this approach succeed in the recent Writers Guild of America strike, where workers were able to negotiate their ability to use AI to help their work without fear of losing their jobs. This is the kind of result that we believe all industries should aspire to. There are multiple steps that the state can take in making that reality more likely. One approach is ensuring that government employees have a seat at the table in AI discussions on government use of AI, setting a public model for responsible, worker-centered AI adoption that could extend into the private sector. The state could use its procurement power to incentivize this kind of AI use. For example, New York recently considered a law that would require any film receiving a production tax credit from the state to avoid using AI to replace salaried employees. Another critical step is supporting worker training and transition programs. Already, we are seeing AI replace numerous workers, with threats ranging from chatbots replacing customer service workers and healthcare professionals to autonomous vehicles replacing truck drivers. At the federal level, the proposed Workers' Right to Training Act would mandate on-the-job training for employees in positions at risk of AI displacement. Some states, such as Maine, have also considered legislation that would prohibit AI from being used as a substitute for direct patient care by health professionals. We must also regulate AI's invasiveness and use in workplace decision-making. This is particularly important in protecting against the capacity for AI to undermine workers' rights to organize. AI-driven algorithms have already been used to scan social media accounts of job applicants to flag those who might be inclined to organize a union. Such efforts could effectively kill the capacity for the kind of workplace organizing that is necessary for worker-friendly AI innovation. State-level action on this has been limited so far, but there are some exceptions. Illinois passed a law requiring employers to notify and obtain consent from job applicants before using AI-driven facial recognition software in video interviews. Other state and local governments have proposed legislation requiring audits of AI systems used in employment decisions to ensure they're not engaging in discrimination, and Senator May Quaid in Minnesota has similarly discussed legislation to prohibit AI's use in hiring decisions. Finally, it is crucial that we build a long-term governance framework for AI. AI will continue to evolve rapidly, and any regulatory framework must be able to adapt to new developments. There are two key ways to build this kind of framework. First, as already discussed, supporting worker power, ensuring that employees have a voice in shaping AI implementation. In this case, workers will retain voice regardless of any AI technological advancement. Second, and perhaps most practically for the present moment, establishing a governance structure capable of ongoing AI evaluation and responsive regulation. Some states are already taking steps in this direction. Connecticut passed a law requiring its Office of Policy and Management to establish policies on AI. Other states, including Massachusetts and Louisiana, have created AI task forces to study its impact and recommend policy responses. Establishing an AI task force in Minnesota that includes worker representatives and is charged with developing AI regulations would be an important and pragmatic first step in ensuring that AI development aligns with the well-being of working Minnesotans. In closing, I'll reiterate, AI is already transforming workplaces in Minnesota, and its impact is only going to grow in the coming years. Indeed, there are reasons to believe that our analysis is already outdated within its first month in existence. Social media should serve as an important example of what can happen if governments cede their responsibility and simply let the industry dictate the terms of their own development. That history cannot be repeated here. We have a unique opportunity now to shape how AI is integrated into our economy. Again, that is not a call to slow down AI innovation, but rather to recognize that the choices we make in the coming years are likely to have profound implications for guiding that innovation and making sure that it enhances economic opportunity rather than exacerbating inequality. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to any questions and conversations.
Thank you very much for your presentation today. I'll maybe just start us off real quick with a very basic question. And that is right toward the beginning of your slides, and you talked about the growth of AI versus the growth of generative AI. And I just wonder, at least for myself, I have sort of paid attention to this development of AI through hearing sort of anecdotal stories that pop up in the media or discussions that are happening in the public. But there's a lot that I don't understand about the basics of what AI is and how it works. So just to sort of lend us off or start us off here, what's the difference between when you're talking about AI versus generative AI?
Yeah, Chair McEwen, it's a good question. So generative AI refers to content creation. So a lot of us, if you've used ChatGPT, you've sort of seen this in action, right? You ask a prompt and then get a response. But you're actually seeing the creation of content by AI. Whereas The broader use of AI could refer to, again, things like computer vision systems that use AI to be able to see where to place a cut, for example, right? This is where we see AI's impact on something like carpentry, where there's these sort of computer-guided systems that rely on artificial intelligence to make precision cuts. So generative AI is part of AI, but it's a specific subset. And actually, this broader use of AI has more profound implications, despite a lot of the headlines really tracking towards generative AI.
Thank you. So what I'm getting from that is that, so this generative AI is exactly what it sounds like. It's when AI is generating, sort of acting in this sci-fi future way that we always thought of computers writing movie scripts, for example, or actually coming up with its own independent content or product that is different from just assisting with a task. I guess there's a sort of maybe a gray area there, but is that sort of is that correct?
Yeah, Chair McCune, I believe that's how I would define it. Yeah, I think that the real difference is sort of this content creation that you see in a generative AI model that is not necessarily inherent in any use of AI.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, I'd like to open it up to any questions you have, complicated or simple, or or comments also. Yes, Senator Gruenhagen.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, thanks for the presentation. The in my district, and I think you hear it a lot, there's going to be, let's just pick healthcare. There's going to be a lot of shortages. I mean, we got shortages of nurses. There's one study on the internet that I quoted last year on the Senate floor. By 2030, I think, if I remember right, we're going to be 2,230 or 60 doctors short in the state of Minnesota alone, okay? So we're headed towards a lot of shortages in key areas of healthcare, technology, or whatever. To me, AI will help with those shortages, or am I misunderstanding?
Chair McCune.
Yes, after you, please.
Okay.
Answer.
Chair McCune, Senator, no, again, our point is not here to suggest that AI innovation is a bad idea or that it can't be used in healthcare settings. I think our concern would be that it be implemented, for example, in a healthcare setting in a way that might contradict what nurses in those settings would like to see, in a way that would add to the workload of nurses or doctors without ensuring that it's actually serving as a tool for them. So I want to be clear that there are uses of AI within healthcare settings that are going to be important, I think, for addressing workforce shortages. There are also, I think, a number of other policies that should be considered alongside AI in addressing workforce shortages in healthcare, which I'm sure other people who will testify today can speak to. But I think thinking about how to make sure that the implementation of AI and AI innovation is done in a place like healthcare in a way that accords with the desires and what nurses and doctors who are, frankly, experts in the way that those technologies could help, that they're involved in those conversations, and that as we think about policies, that there are actually policies are structured to ensure that those conversations are happening and that AI isn't simply being implemented in a way that goes over the desires of the workers that it's theoretically designed to aid.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. And also, Mr. Schweitzer, if you have anything additional, please feel free to introduce yourself, perhaps very briefly, because we didn't hear from you as part of the conversation, and feel free to answer as well.
Sure. Thank you, Chair McEwen. My name is Jake Schweitzer. I'm the Executive Director of North Star Policy Action. Aaron is the brains behind the operation. The only piece I would add to Aaron's response to your question, Senator, is if you go back to our very first slide, what we've seen so far is workers overwhelmingly saying that the use of AI in their work is in fact adding to their workloads. and not increasing productivity in such a way that, again, hearing from workers directly in these spaces, AI as of yet isn't going to be, necessarily useful in replacing their jobs and filling shortages, whatever. In fact, it's making, their jobs and their expertise even more necessary. So what, we could do as policymakers is increase worker voice in the adoption of these technologies moving forward.
And I'll go back to you in just a second, Senator. But I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit on that point. I made a note of that when I was listening to your presentation, just looking for, and we'll be hearing from some testifiers too, who can probably illuminate some of those details for us. But when I hear that we have this high percentage of workers who are saying AI is actually making my job harder to do, and I'm maybe not able to be as productive because I'm trying to manage this AI. Could you give us maybe an example or tell us how that might work? What does that look like for a worker?
Yeah, so there's, the research on this is still new in trying to understand how AI is being implemented in workforces. But one example that I can think of is in call centers where AI is being used as an aid, for example, to assist individuals, customer service support specialists. What they reported is when they felt like AI was being used as a coach, prompting them to do things like slow down or address a specific issue, right? Presenting information. They found it to be very helpful. When it was used as a performance monitor where it felt like they needed to speed up to get through a certain number of calls or reach a certain productivity quota, that's when it started to feel less helpful. So that's not an example that's going to apply to every case. That's specific to customer support specialists. But doing that kind of implementation, piloting different programs with AI to try and figure out, okay, what's helping workers and what isn't, and then allowing workers to bargain over those terms, I think is the kind of future that we should look for in AI innovation.
Thank you. Senator Gruenhagen, did you have any follow-up?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I know you indicated that there's been some laws passed in other states. I do think we need data on this, and are these laws effective? Are they retarding things? One thing about government, will AI replace elected legislators? No, just kidding. Just me. Thank you. Thank you for that endorsement. Because I might have to look for a different job. I'm just kidding. I got to get serious here. No, this is a very important topic. I just think, there's people in government that think too much misinformation is being shared on the internet, and they want to control that. And we've seen that in the past on elections. So, government has a tendency to overreact and stifle in many cases. And that's why I would, as an elected legislator, I'd like to really see data on this. We have another presentation, I think, coming up here by a PhD. And in his presentation, which I just glanced over, it looks like we're going to need 3 million more skilled in AI, 30 million more developers, 300 million developers that generate AI. So, technology does cause, we live in a dynamic economy, it does cause a ripple effect. When you created the automobile, buggy whips, that people who produce buggy whips went out of business, okay? There is a law of cause and effect here. And I just think government needs to tread lightly and make sure that the data is there to justify any restrictions. I think it can be abused. Human nature tends to abuse things for financial gain. I don't know if you've noticed that. But it can also, in government, we've seen at the national level, AI can expose a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. And we definitely need that here in the state of Minnesota, as we've even had the federal government accuse us that we have a fraud problem here. So I wouldn't want us to go down to a path to restrict the use of AI in areas that could greatly benefit us. I understand, the worker displacement, but again, when you have advances in technology, there is going to be a certain level of displacement, but it usually opens up other opportunities. And anyway, those are just thoughts to consider. Last question I'll ask is, where do you get your statistics and funding from as an organization?
Mr. Rosenthal or Mr. Schweitzer?
Well, I'll let Aaron speak to our statistics. We are supported by a number of areas, labor unions, employers, other interested folks in supporting our mission and performing research on behalf of working people.
Yeah, Chair McEwen, Senator, I thank you for the question and all of the thoughts, and really agree generally with what you're saying. But also, I agree that given the sort of novelty of AI, data is absolutely essential to addressing this issue. Our own statistics come from matching patent language around AI innovation, so AI technology patents, to occupational detailed, sort of like occupational duties. So basically the extent to which there's high levels of overlap between what an AI technology says it's going to do and what a job currently involves, that's where we say, okay, that job is at risk of being impacted by AI. The one thing I would say is that I don't think that there's necessarily a contradiction between innovation and regulation. I believe that properly done, regulation will encourage the kind of innovation that can help drive AI's use in Minnesota in really important ways. I agree that the history of technology is that as new technologies emerge, other opportunities open up and displacement does happen. The issue is that a lot of that history is filled with periods in which workers are deeply harmed in that initial period of displacement. And so there's a real need for, I think, governments to think about how to ensure that that initial displacement does not drive rapid amounts of inequality that I think we saw on the back end of the Industrial Revolution all the way up to the computer revolution. So where can government intervene in those spaces to help workers as we move from the current economy to one in which AI is a central player? And that's where I would again say, draw on data, draw on what other states are doing. Let's make sure we understand what's working in other states. And something like a task force, I think, would be really helpful in positioning Minnesota to be effective.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Schweitzer.
Chair McEwen, just jumping back in on Senator Gruenhagen's original point, we've got the one side of this which you've discussed, which is about worker displacement, which I do think there's an appropriate policy response to addressing, which is, we could be funding and supporting training programs for workers who are being displaced by this technology. That's one way. But there's an entire piece of this where workers are affected that isn't just about their jobs being replaced, which is about surveillance, about the use of this technology to potentially discriminate against workers in hiring processes and other things, to surveil their social media activity and restrict their free speech rights, other things where that worker might not lose their job, but they may lose out on a ability to be promoted if an AI is analyzing their workforce and trying to predict who the best promotion candidates are, and maybe they're deciding that women of a certain age are most likely to get pregnant and holding those folks back from promotion capabilities, which is something we've seen discussed, or other areas where, you mentioned, human error, when there's a profit motive in place. Not going to disagree with you there. Imagine a computer where their only driving force is, or their only driving motive is increasing profit. They're going to overlook all kinds of things that we as humans would care about. And that's the type of use of this technology that we're concerned about. And we think there is a very appropriate policy response to regulating.
Thank you very much for that. And I'll just ask you to be very short because I know that Senator Dornick, but response, Senator Gruenhagen.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I especially appreciated the comment where you agree with me on most then, especially for the rest of the senators, okay? I don't get that very often. Anyway, no, I do agree with the fact that technology can be used or abused. You know what I mean? There's tremendous benefits, but it can be abused. But I think we have to tread a little lightly when it's this new and make sure that the things we put in place don't inhibit technology versus there is some consideration, like you mentioned, in certain situations that need to be addressed. So I think we're going down the same path. It just, we're a little apart yet in some areas maybe. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Dornick.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and just want to thank you both for coming. This is a very, very important topic, and it's going to be affecting us for many years in the future. And so I appreciate your work and your study. And I just had a question, and Senator Gruenhagen kind of brushed up against it, but you mentioned research is new. Just a little bit more on your data collecting and your North Star policy, who you are, and just a little bit about those things. And I appreciate your comment about the task force. I think that is really something we need to do fairly quickly. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Rosenthaler, Mr. Schweitzer?
Yes, Senator, Chair McEwen and Senator, in terms of the data, again, so we're drawing, this is a methodology that's been used in a couple of other reports that is drawing on AI patent language, so AI technologies that are being introduced and are seeking patents, and then comparing those against occupational duty language from ONET. So it's basically trying to say how much is what AI technology is saying it will do, how much does that align with what a job currently involves doing. So if an AI system, AI patent, for example, is saying that it's going to write software code, right, the extent to which that overlaps with software development, a software developer's job, we say, okay, that job is at risk. The one other point I would make on the data that we're using, so we use a specific methodology here that finds that 17% of workers are at risk. Some of you may have seen an analysis put out by DEED in September that used a different methodology and found that 56% of workers, 1.6 million workers in Minnesota, are at risk of exposure from AI. I think, you know, obviously these models are very sensitive because the technology is so new, but I think the important thing to understand is where they agree, which is the impact is going to be broad, and it is going to be broad across a lot of industries, and ultimately, I think regardless of the specifics of who's going to be impacted, that breadth and that pace of change is really what motivates our call to say something needs to be done now. Because if we wait too long, the impact will spread through the economy without any guardrails around it.
Chair McEwen, Senator, I would just add our number saying that 17% of workers in Minnesota, our jobs could be impacted. That's really a floor, a minimum, because we're seeing, brand new patents, brand new uses for AI every single day. As Aaron mentioned, our report is already out of date. But again, that's about job description, about job duties. The other side of this, where AI is being used in surveillance and hiring and other things, those are uses that could and will impact every single worker, 100% of Minnesota workers, students, everybody who lives in the state. So that 17% number is very, very much a floor.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Senator Dornick? Okay. Senator Liskey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I find this to be a very intriguing subject. I think it's more of a comment that I have to make than a question per se. I can see it from both sides. The argument of losing jobs, or in this case, taking jobs and replacing them with an AI engineered program, can be something that would be in there. It definitely changes the efficiencies, changes how the business is going to work and how the model works. I work in a small chiropractic clinic. I own my own clinic. I run it every single day. I'll be there this afternoon seeing 15 to 16 patients yet tonight. The pros to AI would be that since I run it on my own and I have all these notes that I have to take, there's obviously government regulation requiring note taking and things of that nature. A lot of people use AI in that field to create the notes for them, and that would be a huge benefit, right? The downfall is that now I don't have to hire someone for that position, not that I was going to anyways, but It makes my job more efficient. Now, the question becomes the other side of the equation. We hear a lot about fraud, waste, and abuse. Like you said, AI is designed to do one thing and one thing only most times. And if that is to increase income, my notes now, if I sent it over to the AI, could easily replace what I should have been doing for notes and focused on just the monetary gain of what my notes would say. So I can see both sides of the issue. You know, I want to make my clinic more efficient. It makes my job easier. I can get back to focusing on my family, focusing on my other job of being here, things of that nature. But I also have to weigh the odds of, is it going to do what it should do? And it has to have a lot of person oversight on it. And again, if we were to, you know, extend that into a different clinic system, I've been to an orthopedic surgeon recently. Just last year, I had orthopedic surgery on my foot. That led to, there was a scribe in the room. Well, if AI is doing the scribing, no longer do they need the scribe that's there working. So I can see how this can play a role, both positive and negative, on the labor force. It can play a positive and negative role on the fraud, waste, and abuse side, because it can both find it, but it also can create it. So I appreciate the conversation. I think the research that you guys are working on is great, but I think, like you said, it's outdated, unfortunately, because this is expanding so quickly. And then it comes into the need of, you know, data centers, which is something that I've been talking about publicly a lot lately, because that's also going to play a role. And so not only the AI in the realm of the labor industry, but also in the realm of what the demands are for computers and processing and all of that. So I look forward to keep hearing from you guys. Just keep in mind that there's two sides of every story, and I hope the research keeps pointing out the positives as well as the negatives. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. Here. Yes, Senator Uma Verbaeten.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for the presentation. One of the things that I've just been thinking about around AI is, you know, as humans, we're flawed, and then in the systems that we create, we can sort of continue on the biases that we have. As you were talking about healthcare, I'm thinking about just, you know, the issues that we have there around Black maternal health and the experiences that many Black women have in the system of not being believed when they're in pain. And so I think, you know, AI is coming at something that we're going to want to use and use in a responsible way, and we need to regulate it. I totally agree. And I'm hoping that there's also those opportunities for us to, you know, be aware of the old biases that we have and try to use these tools to actually combat them. So I'm just curious what your take is on that, if you're seeing any best practices, how we can either avoid building that into the tools or using the tools to actually help us solve those problems.
Thank you.
Yes, after you.
Yeah, Chair McEwen, Senator. It's a really important point, and I think, you know, ultimately it's a bit counterintuitive, the idea that an algorithm can contain bias. But of course, as you pointed out, the fact that they're designed by humans often means that the biases from those humans are imprinted onto algorithms that they create. In terms of best practices, I think what we're starting to see states and cities do is say, we're going to require audits of AI-driven algorithms that are being implemented either in hiring or in healthcare or in the criminal justice system to ensure that there are not discriminatory impacts coming from the use of those algorithms. So ensuring that as frequently as possible there's an evaluation being done that is able to identify any discriminatory impacts from AI seems to me so far to have been the best practice. But again, there is a lot of legislation rolling out. States are taking action on this a lot right now. So it could be that there will be other practices introduced soon, but that is the sort of the gold standard that I've seen so far.
Yes, after you.
Chair McEwen, Senator, thank you for the question. Again, I would just add, Aaron and I are not AI developers or not software people. So for us to try to figure out how to write this in the best way, we're just not going to be able to. The policy response, though, again, as we've repeated ad nauseum, this is moving so fast, our research is out of date, the policy response is out of date. And thinking about how a Minnesota legislature could respond to this, as a part-time legislature that, only meets once a year, you're never going to be able to keep up if you're trying to do this, passing a law once a year. You're going to be behind the minute that law is passed. Something like an ongoing task force that can actually be staffed with representatives of workers, representatives of the technical side of this, that can keep up with the changes, that can keep up with the uses of this and recommend policy changes or be empowered to create their own regulations. That's, in my opinion, one of the only ways that we're going to be able to keep up with the pace of this. Just because, again, it's so much faster than any of us can get a handle on. Just saw a headline today about the University of Chicago, trying to use this to predict crime before it occurs. That is some science fiction stuff that none of us saw coming a week ago that is now being discussed in headlines. Are police departments thinking about this, right? Like, this is the type of thing that we're so far behind on.
Thank you. Any follow-up? Good, okay. All right, and members, before we move on to our testimony, I just want to point you to your packets. We do have a copy of the report. Thank you very much for providing that. And I think that the report was just released this year. Is that correct? Yep. So when we are talking about information being out of date, I think that is just a nod to how quickly these things are moving along. We have a report that is just released now this year, and we're already talking about things as if they had moved on. And I am finding that this is sort of an interesting framing that we're hearing about sides. I'm not really hearing sides so much from what you're talking about, rather concern that the AI could be used in ways to manipulate the workforce or manipulate working people, or in the sort of rush to maximize profit for a very few, that people's rights could be trampled, that and that their quality of life in their workplace or their lives could be compromised by this technology. And so how do we work together to try to make sure that we can minimize that or ultimately try to make sure that that doesn't happen to people. So I appreciate, though, the idea to really try to view this in a holistic way, which I'm also hearing from the two of you in your presentation. So I encourage members to take a look at that. And will you be sticking around in case we have further questions? Thank you very much for sticking around, and thank you very much for the information that you shared with the committee today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Next on our list, we have testifiers Melissa Heising with the Minnesota AFL-CIO, followed by Jeff Tollefson, President and CEO of the Minnesota Technology Association. And if you want to make your way up, and if you'd please introduce yourself for the record and then proceed with your testimony. Thank you very much for being here today.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Melissa Heising, and I'm Legislative Director at Minnesota AFL-CIO, a voluntary democratic federation of over 1,000 local unions representing over 300,000 workers in public sector, private sector, and building trades across the state. The AI industry is rapidly transforming workplaces, leaving workers unprotected from surveillance, privacy invasions, discrimination, and erosion of labor rights. These immediate threats are real, and labor unions, public officials, and civil society are leading the charge to fight back. But to proactively protect workers over the long term, we must also strategize beyond these obstacles to prevent future ones through laws and regulations that shape and incentivize the technological development ecosystem. Workers are experts in the use of technology. A lot can be learned by engaging them and their union representatives in the early stages of both the development of laws and the deployment of technology. Failure to involve workers meaningfully will slow things down and stymie efforts to implement technology, creating costly and negative outcomes. Labor has a broad framework for how technology should be governed and regulated. Legislation that protects end users, including workers, should establish guardrails against harmful uses of AI in the workplace, strengthen protections for labor rights and broad opportunities for collective bargaining, create a worker-centered workforce development and training system, institutionalize worker voice within AI research and development, require transparency and accountability in AI applications, model best practices for AI use with government procurement strategies, protect worker civil rights, and uphold democratic integrity. Putting these principles into practice is how we get to responsible and safe deployment of these technologies. And there are a number of states that are developing legislation that embodies these principles, and we look forward to participating in future discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, I'll just proceed with our next testifier. Unless people have a burning question, then please feel free to raise your hand. Next, we have Mr. Tollefson. Thank you. And after that, we have Shannon Duvier with AFSCME Council 65. If you want to proceed to the front as well. Mr. Tollefson, after you.
Thank you, Chair McEwen and members of the committee. My name is Jeff Tollefson. I serve as president of the Minnesota Technology Association. We're a coalition of just over 170 tech-enabled member companies and organizations, really united in a mission to build a stronger tech ecosystem and innovation economy in our state. And really thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts on artificial intelligence, its impact on our innovation economy, and maybe more importantly on our workforce. I think we can all agree that AI is already transforming the way we work and live, and that change is only going to intensify and accelerate. AI has the potential to enhance productivity and efficiency in nearly every sector of Minnesota's economy, from manufacturing and healthcare to financial services and retail. And as a state facing a demographic drought, is highlighted in the research report titled Minnesota's Vanishing Workforce by Lightcast in the Minnesota Business Partnership. We face a future with more expected job openings than available workers. AI can help bridge this gap by augmenting human labor, automating repetitive tasks, and allowing workers to focus on higher value problem-solving roles. At the same time, we must acknowledge the challenges. AI will continue to disrupt certain job categories, requiring workforce adaptation and reskilling. Some routine jobs will change or even disappear, and we must be proactive in supporting workers through upskilling and transition programs. However, history has shown that technology-driven job transformations most often lead to the creation of new roles and industries that we cannot yet fully realize. And Minnesota must position itself to capitalize on these opportunities. It's important to recognize that any AI policies that prioritize rigid labor protections over business competitiveness could unintentionally harm Minnesota's economic future. While ensuring fairness in the workplace is important, policies that make AI adoption overly expensive or cumbersome for employers could potentially drive companies and jobs out of Minnesota. Businesses have choices about where to invest and grow. If AI regulations in Minnesota become more restrictive than in peer states, we risk losing not just jobs, but also innovation, entrepreneurship, and tax revenue. It also can reduce Minnesota's competitiveness for AI investment. AI is a global race, and states that strike the right balance between responsible innovation and workforce adaptation will be the ones that attract and retain high-value industries. Policies that focus too much on restricting AI's roles in the workplaces rather than preparing workers to thrive alongside it could make Minnesota a less attractive destination for businesses. As policymakers, you play a critical role in ensuring a balanced approach to AI regulation. Rather than focusing on restricting AI's impact through mandates and barriers, we believe Minnesota should adopt a strategy that, one, encourages innovation by making our state a hub for responsible AI adoption and business expansion. Two, invest in workforce adaptation by supporting retraining programs, industry partnerships, and incentives that help workers adapt and transition to what may be new AI-enabled roles. And three, is risk smart, not risk averse. addressing legitimate concerns such as algorithmic bias and data privacy with targeted, thoughtful policies rather than broad reactionary restrictions. Minnesota has an opportunity to lead, not by resisting and over-regulating AI's evolution, but by harnessing its potential to strengthen our workforce and our economy. We urge this committee to take a measured approach that encourages AI innovation while ensuring Minnesotans are prepared for the rapidly changing future of work. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Okay, and if you would stick around, there may be members who have questions. Senator Gruenhagen, do you have a question? Okay, I'm sorry, we do have a question if you'd rejoin us.
I have mostly comments, but I have a question in there.
And Senator, we do have a number of other, I just want to make sure that we're not, repeating too much of what we've already said. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, you did a very good job of articulating my position, is that there's potential for abuse, and we need to put constraints in those areas, but there's a potential for abuse by government, over-regulating and mandating, and actually retarding the advancement of technology, which could attract numerous businesses to our state. And that's why I just think what he said really needs to be taken to heart in terms of the caution, because it's so easy for government to overreact and thereby inhibiting technology's benefits. And yet we want to be careful, kind of like Senator Liskey said, it's a double-edged sword. And so I can't think of my question, so I'll pass. Okay.
Thank you, Senator. Well, you can have another bite at it when we're done. Thank you very much, sir. And now we have, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your last name. Is the French pronunciation Duvier, or if it's a different
My
pronunciation?
husband's an angry Germ. No, I was kidding, German.
Please go ahead and introduce
Duvier.
yourself for the record, and we look forward to hearing your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair McEwen and other members of the committee for conducting this important hearing on artificial intelligence and its effect on our workforce. My name is Shannon Duvier. I'm the Executive Director of AFSCME Council 65. Our council represents around 14,000 workers in Minnesota, primarily in greater Minnesota and rural areas. Our workers provide vital services in healthcare, local government, education, law enforcement, transit, and other frontline fields that sustain their communities. There is no doubt that AI advances provide new opportunities for Minnesota's residents, workers, and the economy. However, without proper implementation, AI could pose significant risks to our workers and the communities they serve. Our members fear potential jobs displacement due to AI, which would greatly impact the services available to the public, particularly in rural communities. We are beginning to see pilot programs launched in greater Minnesota, heavily or sometimes completely utilizing AI instead of human expertise. This is not just a white-collar issue, it is also a blue-collar worker issue. We have seen semi-autonomous cars being tested for transit options instead of using our transit drivers. We've also seen testing of fully autonomous vehicles, such as with Amazon, for deliveries. We've seen GPS systems utilized for farm equipment to operate it, where you don't even have to be in the vehicle. So what would happen if that technology would be applied to, say, plow drivers or bus drivers? I don't believe that a AI-operated plow truck would stop for one of our citizens who's in the ditch, and many of our public sector plow drivers do things like that when they are out plowing roads. Just last week, one of our Onemia bus drivers, you probably saw it on the news, due to his human expertise, he avoided a head-on collision and protected the lives of the people on that bus. We are seeing kiosks be used for vehicle registration instead of local government workers. We're seeing iPads being used to check in patients for medical appointments instead of our healthcare workers. So they get handed an iPad and somebody in Iowa or Missouri or some other state is checking them in for their healthcare appointment, not a physical person that's at the Virginia clinic, for example. However, we understand utilizing AI to fill potential gaps in service. However, we need to be aware how disruptive this shift in service could be for our communities. Our workers are already underpaid as it is, and any reduction in hours due to AI could make it even harder for them to make their ends meet for their families. It may cause workers to move in search of better job opportunities, which would have a domino effect in our rural communities. There would be less workers available to be assistive with work that cannot be done by AI, like helping people with mental and/or physical disabilities safely enter and exit public transportation vehicles. It would mean less money flowing into our local economies, impacting our small businesses and local school systems. AI advancement without any type of guardrails could exacerbate what we are already seeing: hardworking people left struggling while wealth is consolidated among the very few. Importantly, AI applications are not faultless, and the increased use of AI has implications for us all. Across the country, we are seeing state and local governments increasingly turn to automatic AI algorithms to decide who gets access to assistance and who does not. For example, an effort in automating all unemployment insurance claims in Michigan led to more than 40,000 people being wrongly accused of unemployment insurance fraud. We have also seen private health insurance companies using AI to deny insurance claims and issue length of stay recommendations that go against the advice of their clinicians. With AI evolving at a rapid pace, we need proactive legislation that establishes clear guidelines and protections for our communities. We need oversight to ensure that AI remains assistive to workers rather than being a replacement for workers. I liked the previous comments on generative AI versus assistive AI, and we need to focus on it being assistive, not generating and replacing workers. If jobs are eliminated due to AI, we need opportunities for our workers to receive job training so they can stay in their communities. We need to ensure that we are creating an AI future in which we all benefit. Thank you for allowing me to testify today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And if you're able to stick around too, we may have questions at the end. Thank you. Next, we have Hattie Idelsky, an RN with MNA. Welcome to the Senate Labor Committee. And after that, we have Casey Lewis with SAG-AFTRA. And if you'd please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair McEwen and members of the committee. My name is Hattie Idelsky. I reside in McLeod County. I'm a registered nurse, and I work as a nursing practice specialist at Minnesota Nurses Association. Thank you for this opportunity to come here and speak with you all today. I'm here on behalf of nurses who are deeply concerned about the growing use of artificial intelligence in healthcare. Nurses were the backbone of the healthcare system. We provide hands-on care, we advocate for our patients, and we work diligently to ensure safe and ethical care. However, AI is being introduced in ways that threaten our jobs. It increases workplace surveillance and undermines our ability to advocate for better working conditions. AI is being used to justify job cuts by replacing skilled nurses with automation that cannot match our critical thinking, our compassion, and the patient-centered care that we provide. Hospitals see AI as a cost-cutting tool, but understaffing leads to poorer patient outcomes and more dangerous working conditions for us. Nurses are already unacceptably understaffed, allowing an AI algorithm to make staffing decisions that may cause nurses to have many patients or too many patients, also to send nurses home or to call them in with little to no notice will lead to more burnout in a time where we absolutely cannot afford to lose any more bedside nurses. There is a fear of AI-driven surveillance in hospitals violating privacy and autonomy for nurses. There's institutions that are using AI to track the amount of time we spend with our patients, and they also can track where and when we take our breaks. This type of monitoring does not improve patient care. It instead fosters a culture of fear and moral suffering. In addition, Who's liable when the AI system makes mistakes? Will it be the nurse that's going to be held accountable, or is it going to be the AI system? How do we even hold AI accountable? Using AI to monitor and penalize a nurse allows for hospitals and healthcare corporations to undermine a nurse's right to collective bargaining and labor protections, creating a chilling effect throughout the workforce. AI should be a resource to enhance patient care, not a means for corporations to control their workers. AI systems are increasing our workloads, not reducing them. Many AI systems require nurses to spend more time on data entry, documentation, and system oversight. It becomes computer care instead of patient care. Hospitals use AI to demand higher productivity without accounting for the physical and emotional toll patient care takes on us. Over-reliance on AI takes away skilled labor, de-skills the nursing workforce, and makes it difficult to maintain our competency, creating dangerous working conditions as we know AI accuracy is very inconsistent. Lastly, AI bias is real. AI systems rely on data that often reflects inequalities, and when these biases go unchecked, they can result in unfair treatment of both patients and nurses. AI-driven workforce management tools are already being used to evaluate nurse performance, to predict so-called inefficiencies, and even to determine disciplinary actions. These systems lack transparency and fail to account for the realities of patient care. We need policies that protect nurses from AI-driven job displacement, surveillance, and retaliation. AI should be used as a tool to support healthcare workers, not to exploit them. We ask for transparency in AI decision-making. We ask for legal protections against AI-based retaliation, and we ask for a commitment to safe staffing standards that prioritize care over corporate profits. Without clear protections, AI will not enhance healthcare. It will harm both patients and nurses, ultimately harming our communities. We ask that you stand with us in looking at public policy to ensure AI is used responsibly, ethically, and in a way that strengthens and not undermines our profession. So thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. And if you're able all to stick around in case there's questions later, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Senator Gruenhagen, do you have something?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, you're from McLeod County?
Yep, Lester Prairie.
Has anything I said affect your vote for me? No. Hey, I've served on the HHS committee in the House especially, and one of the ways that the Minnesota Hospital Association has promoted to try to address the shortage, because I agree with you. I've talked to a lot of nurses who say they're just burnt out or they left the healthcare industry because of, and then doctors are getting burnt out too. Mm-hmm. I tend to blame it on Obamacare, but that's for another discussion. But, one of the solutions that they have promoted is the compact, so that we could bring qualified nurses in from outside the state of Minnesota. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Senator Gruenhagen, I'm going to ask if we can park that question. Very good question, and pertinent to ask this person who's with us today, but I want to stay on the topic of AI and just oriented around that. But I appreciate the question, and if we could maybe have a sidebar later if you want to discuss that, please feel free. I just want to make sure we get to all of our speakers first.
Okay, I was trying to address it from the standpoint that she was saying that of shortages and getting burnt out, and that's why I brought that
Sure.
question.
That's certainly an issue for discussion.
Thank
you very much. Next, we have Casey Lewis. Thank you. Welcome to the Senate Labor Committee. And after that, we have Wade Lundberg. If you would also join us up at the testifiers table, you're next. And Mr. Lewis, welcome. If you'd introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Chair McEwen, members of the committee, my name is Casey Lewis. I am the SAG-AFTRA Twin Cities local president. The Twin Cities is one of SAG-AFTRA's 25 locals across the United States. Our local represents over 600 members in Minnesota, with the largest concentration of those members being in the Twin Cities metro. The Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Radio and Television Artists, represents actors, announcers, broadcast journalists, dancers, DJs, news writers, news directors, program hosts, puppeteers, recording artists, singers, stunt performers, voiceover artists, influencers, and other media professionals. We are the faces and the voices that entertain and inform America and the world, and our members face the threats of AI every day. You may remember in 2023, SAG-AFTRA Film and Television Actors went on strike, a national strike for 118 days, during which one of the major points of contention was protections against the displacement and replacement of our members by AI in our TV, movie, and streaming contracts. With AI still in its relatively early stages at that time, we made great strides in establishing worker protections along two general principles: informed consent, which empowers performers with the right to control their digital identities in an environment of transparency, ensuring they get to say how, when, and where their likenesses are used in AI-generated content, and fair compensation, which ensures that performers receive equitable payment for the use of their voice, image, and likeness, especially digital replicas, recognizing the value of their talent and image in an AI-driven entertainment landscape. SAG-AFTRA members are protected in their various occupations by different contracts. Even though we have achieved protections in our TV theatrical streaming, TV animation, and sound recording contracts, we still continue to fight for those same protections for our members in all of our other contracts. We enter into each of these contract negotiations fighting to establish or expand the informed consent and fair compensation protections we have established while working to protect our members and their jobs from AI technology as it evolves in often unpredictable ways. With the potential for AI to disrupt and devastate a workplace, each of our negotiations are done with the intent to make sure our next job is not our last job. This sometimes means that our members go on strike, as our video game performers are currently. In addition to the protections we seek for our members through our contracts, SAG-AFTRA has been involved in public policy and legislative efforts, successful public policy and legislative efforts in New York, California, Tennessee, and Illinois, all protecting people's digital likenesses, voice, and image. It's also important to know that AI protections of digital likenesses are not only the concern of performers and broadcasters. I expect the committee has heard of legislation introduced at the federal level in the form of the No Fakes Act, protecting those in public office as well. Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar is part of this effort. This technology is not only has the ability to take jobs, it also can sow doubt and mislead society by calling into question the very nature of reality. We appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony to this committee and offer our help to the legislature and the people of Minnesota in establishing policy protections for the people in the North Star State. I thank you for this opportunity today, and I'm happy to take questions now or later, whichever you prefer. I will be sticking around.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We'll go ahead and proceed. We have Wade Lundberg here, and then followed by Devin Bruce. If Mr. Bruce wants to proceed, come on up too. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Chair McEwen, Senators, Wade Lundberg, Political Director, Unite Here, Local 17, representing 20 workers in 24 union hotels across the Twin Cities, Bloomington, and Rochester, our major sports facilities, convention centers, airport concessions, food service and cafeterias, craft brewing, and distilling. Unite Here is the largest hospitality workers union in the United States, representing 300,000 workers across America. During this era and new and evolving technologies, our members are more and more impacted by algorithmic management systems, surveillance, and the general transfer of human relations to computer systems. We do not oppose new technology out of hand. Instead, our goal has been to ensure that technology makes jobs better and safer for workers, and that our members are properly supported and not left behind. My comments will focus on one classification, specifically housekeepers or room cleaners, but certainly this can apply to many classifications. We believe that AI/AM can be useful, but only used as algorithmic guidance rather than algorithmic management. Algorithmic management is a series of orders by a machine that a worker has to follow, while algorithmic guidance makes suggestion to workers who are free to override the system based on their knowledge of the situation, the workflow, and knowledge of their own physical strengths and limitations. The job of a hotel housekeeper has the highest injury rate among hospitality workers. The largely female, people of color, and immigrant workers push carts weighing several hundred pounds over carpet, making up to 28 beds a day, scrub bathroom floors, and perform other physically challenging work. In pre-AI/AM technology times, a housekeeper was given a list of rooms to clean on a clipboard in the morning, and she cleaned them in order dictated by her experience. In recent years, a variety of programs have been implemented that algorithmically manage the housekeeper. To be clear, the programs are sold by third-party vendors. These developers have failed to take into account the perspectives of end users, the workers. With that in mind, we believe that there are several important traits that are necessary to ensure that the systems support human labor. First, transparency. The system needs to tell the human both the tasks and for the shift and the rationale behind those suggestions. Second, guidance instead of mandate. Third, regular and ongoing training, while developers usually advertise their product as intuitive. In our experience, what is intuitive for a software designer rarely is for a frontline worker. 4, negotiation. And at present, systems for AI/AM can be imposed on workers without their input. An important step for the future is making the implementation of new technologies more collaborative via negotiations between the end users and managers. In closing, we want to reiterate a point that we made earlier. Management needs to be done by human beings, and workers need to be able to use their own judgment and override algorithmic management systems when necessary. AI/AM need to be tools that promote good management and work practices by increasing transparency, communication, and workers' control of their own situations. AI and AM should not be allowed to manage on their own. We've offered the perspective of frontline workers in hospitality who are experiencing AI/AM in their workplaces. I hope you'll consider their views as you consider appropriate policy responses to new workplace technologies. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. And the last of our testifiers, now we have Mr. Bruce with MAPE. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. For the record, my name is Devin Bruce. I'm the Director of Legislative and Political Affairs for the Minnesota Association of Professional Employees. We're a union of over 18,500 state professionals across all agencies, boards, and commissions. We represent the IT service workers for state government in the executive branch agencies as well as the constitutional offices. We have, for those who also don't know, as was mentioned, we actually do have an advisory council for the Department of Minute called the Technology Advisory Commission, as well as the Transparent AI Governance Alliance, which operates within Minute to try and cobble together some guidelines on best uses and practices. AI tools are widely used by both the general public and state employees. Most of our members have reported that they have simplified previously time-consuming tasks such as developing draft documents, FAQs, memos, or something a little bit more complex like developing and testing sample programmatic code. IT employees at agencies and as well as Minnesota State are required to complete AI modules as part of their annual training programs to ensure that not only their use complies with current state law and best practices around security, but as it relates to accessibility and the code of ethics. For the state workers, state workforce and the public sector in general, the rapid advancement of these technologies produces some unique challenges, and particularly a growing industry to start moving these guidelines into actual regulations, establishing proper safeguards for not just the workforce, but for also the populations that they serve. Despite these tools being more and more integrated into our programs, their main purpose is to support and not supplant workers. At a macro level, we should be developing far more training modules on identifying and detecting, as well as addressing potential bias within the AI work product. What we'll likely also have to do is to address some of the usage in the state procurement process, as well as a complete and thorough look at Chapter 13, because as some folks have mentioned about its potential use in detecting either fraud, waste, or abuse, particularly for the procurement process, as well as the data collected on certain entitlement benefit programs, as well as employee data, so decisions regarding hiring, firing, discipline, all of those are classified as non-public or private. And they do tend to change as they move through a process, as I've testified before, particularly in the grants process. If agencies begin using AI to start screening applicants for entitlement and benefit programs for qualification, there also needs to be some addressed not just in collective bargaining agreements, but in state law of who is liable for improperly denying an applicant from these entitlement programs if they are required to rely on AI tools. We also, for the procurement process, need to address who owns the data and start addressing through the RFP process of what types of tools are going to be implemented and at what level. The other concern outside of the employee protection is around wage suppression and staffing levels. As technology advances and become more integrated into our work, employees are far more productive than they ever have been before, yet wages, particularly in the private or public sector, have stagnated. You'll hear testimony a little bit later on how they've seen an increase because of these high wage, high value job classes, yet for the public sector, we rely on tax dollars, and political decisions are not always easy ones to make to ensure that employees are receiving the wages and benefits that they deserve because it costs money. The other thing that we're seeing is that agencies are adding more and more work because we are more productive and therefore not getting the actual resources as it requires for employees to complete the jobs. So we're seeing higher rates of turnover, higher rates of burnout across the enterprise, particularly in these high IT, high risk, highly productive areas of government. And we've seen numerous reports from our members who are discussing not just the amount of work that they're being asked to complete, but also providing numerous reports to the legislature on the work that they're performing. So we ask that you start looking and addressing some of these larger concerns, not just of worker protections, but also for the actual workloads. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. And now, members, I'd like to go ahead and move on to the next part of our agenda, just to make sure that we get it all in, and then we'll go ahead and open it up. But next on our agenda, we have Professor Manjit Rege, who is Director of the Center for Applied Artificial Intelligence at the University of St. Thomas. Welcome very much to the Senate Labor Committee, Professor. We're happy to have you today. And if you would, for the record, introduce yourself, and we look forward to hearing your testimony today. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Should I be using my laptop and presenting, or Fabian, I think we spoke about it?
Yeah, Professor, we can figure out how to make sure to. get it connected.
So I have a HDMI right here. No. Do you have an HDMI?
HDMI cord, I think we can reconnect or. Let me see. There we go.
This HDMI.
Might be easier if you do.
And just
Yeah, it should be. There we go.
Hey, it's working. Great. Thank you very much for your help.
All right.
And
thank you
make
so
sure,
much.
Professor, sorry, that sometimes the microphone too won't catch your voice, so don't be afraid to lean into it or pull it toward you just to make sure we can hear you.
Sure.
Thank you.
So my name is Manjeet Rege. I am at the University of St. Thomas. I teach machine learning, AI. I have a PhD in machine learning. I write a lot and speak a lot in the media about AI. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. So I'll just briefly speak about AI and its impact about AI on jobs. Mostly I'll be echoing much of what we have heard earlier, but much more from a broader impact and not necessarily about Minnesota. And then I'll close in about my ideas about things that could be done for about how AI is going to be impacting the state of Minnesota. So this particular chart on the x-axis shows annual wage, on the y-axis shows probability of getting exposed to AI. And I want to make a distinction between getting exposed to AI and getting displaced by AI. You could be getting exposed to AI, but if you do not reskill, there is always a danger of getting displaced by AI. In recent times, we have seen two waves of AI. The first wave was around 2012, and that primarily impacted blue-collar jobs. This generative AI wave that started about 2 years ago is projected to also impact certain white-collar jobs as well. So this particular result, and this is from McKinsey, shows different roles such as sales and marketing, software engineering, customer service, and this is primarily going to be the spend in terms of companies that are looking at automating these kind of roles. Now, if you look at the projected impact that this might have, on the left chart, you see the different occupations. And there are certain occupations such as office support, customer service. There is a job decline in those roles, but in a lot of other roles, there is projected to be overall a net gain. On the right, you see in terms of annual wage, there are certain roles that are going to be either impacted negatively, and those are also primarily going to be the ones that have a lower wage. This, I think you guys probably have a printout of this particular slide, if it is, in case it is not legible completely. Above that horizontal line that you see in the middle, all those dots above the horizontal line are different sections of society that are at danger of losing or getting displaced by AI, sorry. So the different columns that you see, wage, education, age, gender, and race and ethnicity. So in terms of wage, if you're in the low or lowest, in terms of education, if you're below a bachelor's degree, in terms of age, if you're 18 to 24, or if you're 50 plus, in terms of gender, females, and in terms of race and ethnicity, blacks and Hispanic. All of these are at most risk of getting displaced due to AI. This is a very concerning survey. On the left in the table, what you see are different occupations and the probability of getting automated with AI, such as office support, legal support, and things like that. On the right, the table that you see shows the same occupations on the left, but the proportion of men and women working in each one of them. And even though in this particular study, there were more men working compared to women, there are certain jobs that are going to impact heavily, and those have higher proportion of women working in those. So as a result, if you look at the bottom line, the last row in the table on the right, 79% of women are going to be endangered as a result of or getting displaced by AI. So AI will disproportionately impact job displacement of women versus men. And that is something concerning as a society that we need to think about. This is from a study that was done by AWS last year. They surveyed more than 1,000 companies and more than 3,000 employees. And what they noticed was that a number of employers are facing a shortage of AI skilled labor, and people who are able to reskill and have the AI knowledge are able to boost their salaries and incomes by up to 35%. So I want to briefly mention about this, this idea about 330 and 300 principle. Currently, there are 30 million software developers worldwide. Currently, there are about 3 million skilled in AI. With generative AI, you are able to lower the bar of entry into software development. So with generative AI, we can generate, or we can create, we can enable the next 300 million developers with generative AI. And all that is possible only with a few things. And these are just some of my ideas. I was approached by Fabian Friday evening, so this was Saturday night I put this together. So these are just a few of my ideas. One is reskilling is extremely important and something that we heard earlier from the earlier speakers as well. And I'm speaking about reskilling from the grassroots level, from K-12 all the way up to college, or even people who may not be interested in getting into college, but conducting training workshops for people who are able to embrace AI in a much better way. So earlier, we heard about certain employees feeling burdened due to AI, and one can also attribute that to the fact that they may not be comfortable with using AI, and perhaps reskilling is a way to help that. The other is something else that we heard earlier as well, establishing an AI advisory council for helping senators and other people as well in the state of Minnesota. Then 3 and 4 are kind of related, and I'm not referring to having heavy regulation. I'm referring to lightweight regulation that basically puts in certain guardrails in place, such as if there is an app, if there is a data being used, where is that data coming from? There needs to be certain transparency about rights of people as well. And then finally, there should be ways to promote public-private partnerships. And what I mean by that is, on one hand, while we are dealing with job elimination, by public-private partnership, I'm thinking about the funding mechanisms for helping startups that primarily have AI as the core of it. So funding those startups, employing people in Minnesota, and funding such kind of activities, where you have universities like, whether it is University of Minnesota or St. Thomas, I think, and we are also blessed to have a number of Fortune 500 companies that can enable this point number 5. I was warned to stay within 10 minutes, and hopefully I've made it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor, for this information you've shared with us today, and also for making time in your busy schedule to come and share with the Senate Labor Committee. Members, with that, I'd like to go ahead and open it up for discussion and questions, either for Professor Rege, who has joined us today, or for our previous testifiers and speakers that we've heard from. You know, it is interesting. I'll just open it up by saying, we've heard some of the testimony from workers, and we've talked about sort of how to achieve some semblance of balance as AI is rushing forward and being implemented. I can't help but think of my own experiences dealing with like customer service with a private company, where you will call and you will talk to a computer and you will push 7 to go to this department, and then you'll speak to another computer, or you push another number for a different thing. And you can just feel throughout our economy in various ways how business often tries to use these technological tools for efficiency's sake, either to cut down on the costs of labor or to try to sometimes they say that it's going to be more helpful for customers, and here and there it is helpful if you have something simple. But so much of the time I'm looking actually to talk to a real person because I have to explain some things, and I'm not going to get the kind of help that I need from a computer. And so that human factor, and in hearing from some of our testifiers too, who represented different workers throughout our economy in Minnesota, that human factor of being able to actually talk to a human being who can make those sort of assessments and calls on the spot with you and ask for more information and kind of have that back and forth is something that I really am afraid of losing as we see AI going forward. And it seems the peak of bureaucratic, almost inefficiency for a consumer and a worker trying to deal with that, which is all going toward either maximizing, like making your customers so frustrated that they give up asking for help and they just go along with whatever system it is that you set up. And we all just put up with worse working environments, worse customer service, worse in order for business to be able to keep maximizing profit. So that is that's sort of where I am thinking about all of the testimony that we've heard today. But I'd love to hear from other members, any thoughts or questions that you have. Yes, Senator Greenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, thanks for the presentation.
Sure.
First question occurred to me is how many professors are going to be replaced by AI? No. You don't have to answer that, no. I do, just from a legislative standpoint, and this is an initial overview, I would be open to discussing, you're going to have a certain amount of displacement with new technology like this, okay? I mean, it's just going to happen regardless of the guidelines. And so I would be open to looking at some type of additional training for displaced workers so that they have a better opportunity going forward. And I think that would be important. What are your thoughts on that, Professor?
Right,
Professor?
absolutely. So, I mean, when you think about the advent of a computer, a personal computer, World Wide Web, each of these, when they first happened, there was always a fear that it may replace a human. But there is always a net gain that has happened, and so it's something similar with AI as well. So as long as, that study that we had a look at where women are mostly at risk, or perhaps certain other sectors of society, if we put mechanisms in place for reskilling those who are probably at danger most, I think we'll do the right thing.
Any follow-up, Senator? Senator Dornick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Professor. This was excellent. And, AI is so quickly coming, and we just had, I was in Workforce and Development, we had an AI update there too, and seeing how far and how quick it's moved and how little I know about it. And as legislators, I'm not sure if all of us are where we're at, but I appreciate your last page, Building a Responsible AI Ecosystem in Minnesota, and I like your points there. And educating us is definitely very helpful. And then kind of where are we in Minnesota? Where, I know it was mentioned, this might not be for you, but if you could answer it, I would appreciate, if you can, that'd be great. If not, we might have to call somebody else up. But it was mentioned about some other states that are doing legislation or have done some. Do you know anything about that? I think it was mentioned California, Illinois, and maybe Tennessee. Is that something that you could address or not?
Professor?
I know that in the state of California, there was a law that they were trying to pass, which was trying to stifle innovation in AI. And a number of AI companies in Silicon Valley were heavily against it. So I know a little bit about that. I do not know about other states per se. But I think what we have learned from what was happening in the state of California about that AI law was that there needs to be a proper balance, not over-regulation, but having transparency so that if there is an app or if there is data of Minnesotans being used, then that transparency needs to be there for people to be aware of. Yeah.
Thank you. Senator Dornan, follow up?
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So I liked your lightweight regulation, I think is what you said in your testimony.
Right.
So I like that term. So with us, I think your advice to us would probably be like your number two is this, well, number one is educate workforce development and then establish an AI advisory council. So where are we at in Minnesota with as far as you see, and how could we keep up, or I know it was said that it's happening so fast that we can't keep up, but you're such an expert, we just really need your expertise in guiding us through this light regulation that we need to address.
Professor?
Right, absolutely. Somebody like me or people like me are more than happy to help out, and having a task force like that basically monitors on a regular basis what is happening in AI worldwide and how that impacts internally within Minnesota and updates all of you guys on a regular basis. I think that should be like an ongoing charge to that task force, where their job primarily is to monitor what is going on in latest and greatest and think about how that may impact us, and by updating all of you.
Follow up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I'll let members speak, so thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Senator Kupek.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for putting on this hearing today. As somebody who comes from the field of meteorology, I have thought long and hard for years about how the robots were coming to take my job, because all of you think that this phone has all the data and you're all a meteorologist because you have one in your pocket. So I've thought long and hard about this. But, and I'm particularly, I think I'd like to just kind of focus in on the idea too of AI kind of sorting through, forms, applications, people who are on programs, because we all know that, as humans, we all come with a certain set of biases when we look at those things, and we are not, infallible. And I think there's probably a perception that, because a computer sorted this out, that is a completely unbiased application of doing this. And we used to and we all know, as a meteorologist, we all know that there are computer models that have biases. A snowstorm from the southwest, you use that model. If it's a clipper coming in, use a different computer model. So we know that there are biases built in to that. And we always used to have the phrase of garbage in, garbage out in the computer model world. So I think it's important to kind of remember that behind all these systems, there is a human that programs a lot of these, and particularly, if you started with some kind of false narrative, the fact that AI will then perpetuate that false narrative on into the future. So just a thought. I don't know if you have any comments on that, but it was just kind of my ramblings and muses over here.
Thank you.
Right.
Professor?
So, when you think about an AI biases come from the data, right? It is not programmed per se by the programmer. And it has been shown that, individuals of darker skin tones in terms of facial recognition. Those softwares do not work. Microsoft had basically they scraped a lot of data from the World Wide Web, and they came up with a chatbot. And if you gave those chatbots, an analogy like what man is to a woman, as king is to a what, to say a queen. If you asked what man is to a computer programmer, woman is to a what, it would respond a homemaker. That was because it had learned from the stereotypes that existed in the text that it had learned from the World Wide Web. So when you think about biases and transparencies, when you see a model being used, again, my point 3 or 4 about guidelines, there should be there should be information about what data it was trained on. Was there a gender balance? Was there an equal proportion of different races being used for that model training? Things like that.
Thank you, Professor. I actually have a question that sort of builds on those comments and that you've all just had, and that is, have you seen any research or information coming through about how AI is affecting people with disabilities? And also, have you had research or learned about instances that you could share with us of this, where there are concerns about discrimination? Like, how are those algorithms, and are they being applied in real time? We've already seen evidence of which is discriminatory.
Right. Yeah, there has been a lot of work in terms of AI being used for people with different kinds of disabilities. Even for aging population, there's been work on, as people age, there is cognitive decline, or even with loneliness. So there are a number of studies where it has been shown where lonely aging population, they would like to tell stories, they would like to converse, and there is nobody to converse with them. So AI sounds just like a human, and they engage with that sect of population, and that really helps in that cognitive decline and preventing that more damage from happening as well. I forgot the second part of your question, sorry.
Oh, I was just curious if you had any data that you could share with us about actual use of AI, because we were talking about these algorithms and how they might apply, and I think we've heard concerns about how they could be used in making hiring decisions or promotional decisions, or in ways that would result in discriminatory practices. Right. And also like that lack of accountability, because even though there is a human creating those algorithms, at some point that right. Human accountability is so buried back in the chain of what is being done that it's hard to actually do that. I'm wondering if you have any examples.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was this statistic that 80% of profiles or resumes are first scanned by an AI, and then it is looked upon by a human. And as a result, in a number of technology jobs, there are more number of men working compared to women. And as a result, AI thinks that gender, male, is something that we need to be looking at in terms of hiring, and there might be a bias developed towards hiring more males. So there has been information like that, work like that. And also in terms of other discrimination, Apple's credit card, this happened a couple of years ago, was giving a higher credit limit to the husband compared to the wife. So even though they are married, the husband got a higher credit limit on the credit card.
Thank you. Yeah. Senator Wiesberg.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know anything about AI, but is there a way to program it to not do those things? I don't know.
Professor?
Yeah, so when you think about how AI goes from an algorithm to a model, right? Algorithm, think about it in terms of a series of steps that talk about how to learn from data. So those series of steps, when it processes large amounts of data, eventually you get this particular model that is now able to make predictions. So if the biases exist in the data to begin with, that there are more people of a particular race, then the biases become part of the model as well. It begins to give a preferential treatment to that particular race or that particular gender, for example. So initially, when the model is deployed, right, when you think about in terms of product development, yes, there will be biases because the first time, you just want to get it working. But before it is released to the public, there needs to be more work in terms of testing to look at different slices of the data, whether it is by race or whether it is by age, to make sure that even though that bias existed in the data, I don't want my model to now eventually deploy it in the real world as well.
Follow-up, Senator?
No, thank you, Chair. Thank you.
And that
Clear
seems
cut,
like
yeah, I know.
the kind of issue, it does seem like the kind of issue that a task force or a special counsel that was created to monitor these issues could perhaps set up a framework for review. It almost reminds me of like at the federal level, the FDA or the systems that we have in place for drug testing, that there would be some sort of accountability for algorithms meeting certain benchmarks, like being within these guardrails that we're talking about that would be set. So that when they are deployed, we at least have some certainty that they're not going to be be below a certain standard that we would set.
That's a good way of thinking about it, an FDA for AI.
Sorry, could you say that again, Professor?
An FDA for AI.
Yeah, nice. Yes. Yes. All right. Thank you very much. And members, any other questions or comments for the professor or our other speakers and testifiers? Okay. Did you have anything, Senator Dornick? Okay. Okay, very good. Well, I just wanted to offer a sincere thank you to everyone who came today to present your data, present your findings and your own observations that you've received from your members of your organizations and their experiences and concerns and hopes for this new technology that is being actively deployed in our society and that we're all trying to get our minds around and try to understand those implications. And as many of you know, and we've heard today that we've had the topic of AI come up in various committees here at the Senate, and so we thought it was appropriate to also have one that focused in particular on working people in our state and some of the ways that we're seeing it already affect working people and how we anticipate it. So we appreciate, I would say in particular, I appreciate the recommendations that we've gotten from some of our experts and also our testifiers for different ideas, policy ideas moving forward, and hope to work on some of that legislation with colleagues and with you as well, the experts. Any comments before I close? Okay, thank you everyone very much. With that, the Senate Labor Committee. Oh, okay. Okay, yes, we are done. Senator Dornick, before we adjourn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to thank you for this hearing. It truly was very informative and very helpful for us. I'm just wondering what we're going to go forward. I see Thursday we are not having a meeting, and so just wondering what we're looking at next week. If we're looking at some bills that are listed, we have in the queue that are bipartisan, and we have some support. So I wonder if we can hear any of those next week.
Thank you, Senator Dornick, for that question. That's correct. Thursday, we do not have a hearing, but we are taking a look right now at what we're going to be doing for next week. And if there are, as always, pieces of legislation or certain topics that you'd like to see our committee focus in on, we're always open to entertaining those discussions. And I know we've had discussions about previously also those different legislation that your caucus is looking to see heard, and we'll continue to consider those things, and also the topics that we've talked about, getting more information like we did today about a topic. So
thank you, Madam Chair. I look forward to discussing those.
Very good. Likewise. All right, thank you, everyone, very much. With that, the Senate Labor Committee is adjourned.